Good afternoon, good morning, everyone. So, thank you very much for all being here. I'd like to welcome you all and thanking you again for joining us for this preparatory webinar of the 2020 International Mayors Forum, entitled Accelerating Decent Work and Economic Growth for a Resilient Urban Recovery in the Era of COVID-19. I'd like to especially welcome the distinguished speakers we have with us today. Mr. Carlos Carrion Crespo, Specialist Public Service at the International Labour Organization, or ILO, in Geneva. Carlos? You have Carlos online?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now I can hear you.
Okay, good. So should I start already?
No, I'll just continue. I'll just say hello to everyone. I want to present everyone first. So, Ms. Lawrence Quark, Secretary General of the Global Social Economy Forum, GSEF in Seoul. Hi.
Hello, everybody.
Ms. Najat Zarouk, Director of the African Local Government Academy, or ALGA, at the United Cities and Local Governments of Africa, UCLG Africa in Rabat. Hi, Najat. Hello. And Mr. Il-Chang Yi, Senior Research Coordinator, Social Dimensions of Sustainable Development Program at the United Nations Research Institute for Social Development, or UNRISD, in Geneva. Hi, Il-Chang.
Morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending where you are. I'm Il-Chang. Very nice meeting you.
But I will continue. So to give you a bit of background, so this webinar is part of a series we're organizing on the topics planned for the forthcoming International Mayors Forum. We have convened the International Mayors Forum previously in cities such as Lilongwe in Malawi, in Vientiane in Laos, People's Democratic Republic, Lao PDR. We organize these every 2 years. And the idea is to strengthen the implementation and achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals, but locally. This year is unlike any other, and as such, we are adapting these conversations to ensure a well-designed International Mayors Forum this November that can engage participants from across the globe and strengthen partnership for a sustainable and resilient recovery for COVID-19 in our cities and our communities worldwide. As a first topic of our webinar series, it's clear that ensuring livelihoods and strengthening job stability is a key priority for our local governments who are suffering from the effect of the pandemic. The United Nations have noted that the job losses as a result of the COVID-19 pandemics are leaving up to half of the global workforce, that is 1.6 billion people without livelihoods, and 60 million more people will be pushed into extreme poverty. The world is experiencing a loss of $8.5 trillion in global output. This is the sharpest contraction since the Great Depression of the 1930s. The current COVID-19 pandemic has greatly impacted the livelihoods and the job stability of many local economies worldwide, in both formal and informal sectors. The informal sector being by far the most affected and where women are also overrepresented. Cities and urban areas in developing countries are already accommodating most of the 1,900 million people living in informal settlements and slums worldwide, where the lack of basic services and overcrowding are hindering proper hygiene, social distancing, and self-isolation measures that are recommended to prevent the spread of the pandemic. But cities can play a leading role in generating national employment, productivity, and economic development, with over 80% of GDP coming from the cities. They are also great contributors to the achievement of the 2030 agenda. The SDGs, especially Goal 8, focus on promoting sustained, inclusive, and sustainable economic growth and full and productive employment and decent work for all. While the pace of global economic growth was already slowing before the pandemic, its impact on the global economic downturn are continuing, and this is especially felt locally. Local governments are currently facing a double challenge of restoring life as normal and accelerating growth, full and productive employment, and decent work for all. Local officials can play a central role in ensuring a swift and sustainable recovery to restore and accelerate progress in delivering the Sustainable Development Goals during this coming decade. The UN Secretary General has underscored that local governments are already taking action to protect local household incomes and access to essential services, but still more needs to be done to strengthen the capacities of local governments. For this webinar, and by engaging you all here today into the conversation, I hope we can provide local governments and local actors with some knowledge and solutions to help cities recover rapidly from the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic and advancing the decade of action and delivery for the 2030 agenda. Thank you, and I look forward to your engagement and lively exchange with our speakers during our webinar today. Thank you. I would like to now to give, not to take too much time, I'd like to give the floor to Mr. Carlos Carrion Crespo, Specialist Public Service at the International Labour Organization, ILO, in Geneva. Carlos, are you there?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Good morning or good afternoon to you all. It's morning here in Geneva. I'm going to discuss the local public service continuation and worker safety at the time of COVID-19, challenges and solution. So you can proceed to the next slide. In addressing the issues around local public services, we must first recognize the difference between the sources of revenue that national and local governments depend on. Municipalities tend to rely on taxes paid by businesses that have been severely affected by the crisis, and many local governments have laid the workers off. National governments should replace these incomes, and some, in fact, have been doing it. Confronting the pandemic will transform economies, perhaps irreversibly. Countries with may be almost matched, but many others have poor exercises of e-government. In those who do have the capacity, the measures raise questions on the role of technology in the new workplaces. And we're talking about privacy issues and the ability of governments to actually have remote or working at a distance facilities. You can go to the next slide. Municipalities employ many health workers and other first responders who cannot abandon their work, but they should not be forced to engage in excessive risks either. The ILO's guidelines on decent work in public emergency services, which were adopted in 2018, contain proposals for action to provide employment stability, workplace safety, health guarantees, and social protection to public emergency workers, including volunteer workers, so they can dedicate all their energies to protecting communities. They also provide recommendations for social dialogue, training, and interagency coordination so public servants can share their knowledge, have a voice in their work environment, and be prepared to confront the growing threat of disasters, epidemics, climate change, and violent acts. You can go to the next slide. There are many other groups of workers at the local level that are key to the recovery. Social protection programs, water operators, particularly in countries with insufficient access to safe sanitation and hygiene, sanitation services that prevent additional health threats, communications offices that share information with people and experiences with other governments at all levels, particularly between different municipalities, mass transportation services that ensure the mobility of essential workers at a great risk to both the drivers and the passengers, wildlife protection that combat wildlife trafficking, which help prevent zoonotic diseases like COVID-19. Correctional services that protect inmates that housed in confined spaces conducive to contagion. And the court systems that need to prevent discrimination, abuse of technological monitoring, and address employment and financial disputes. All of these services are housed not mainly or fully at the local government level. Underlying each one of these public services are public servants at all levels of hierarchy, and their knowledge of the reality on the ground is essential to build the expertise that support local administrations. For this, local governments should exchange information with the unions and consult them with the changes needed after their working condition that affect their working conditions. These workers must also carry out their tasks without improper external influences. And I'm talking about here the possibility of corruption, which in the recovery has been a severe risk. You can go to the next and final slide. ILO instruments require or propose policy measures that promote a human-centered approach to the current crisis and its recovery. Public employers should keep offices and equipment properly maintained and clean, provide sufficient wholesome drinking water or other wholesome drinks, sufficient and suitable washing and sanitary facilities, and adopt measures to prevent the spread of transmissible diseases. Employers should provide appropriate training in occupational safety and health, and ensure that workers' representatives receive adequate information on measures taken to secure occupational safety and health. Workers and their organizations should be consulted and or allowed to inquire into OSH issues. Workers must also comply with workplace safety and health requirements. The ILO also protects the rights at work, safety and health and working conditions of all workers engaged in crisis response. It also recognizes the importance of good governance and combating corruption and clientelism in the prevention of emergencies. The governments should adopt measures to protect workers who are more likely to suffer violence and harassment, like health and emergency services, transport and social workers, and those who work in isolation. All these elements that I have just mentioned are contained in the slide that you have in front of you. And if Desa will share it with you, the slide actually has the links to those conventions. Issues that affect these workers must be addressed at all levels and through an international integrated approach similar to the one adopted in the past to confront the HIV crisis, adapted to the particularities of COVID. Thank you very much for your attention, and I will be available to answer questions.
Thank you very much, Carlos. It's very interesting presentation. It's 7 minutes is not very long, but you gave us a lot, and then it's good to see we will share the slides. Of course, there will be. I'll talk about this later, but They will be on our website for sure. And then people could have access to those links, which are very important. And now I would like to call, now this is the time to call Lawrence Clark, Ms. Lawrence Clark. She's Secretary General of Global Social Economy in Seoul. Lawrence?
Thank you very much, John. To begin, I would like to first express my gratitude and thanks to John Dargon as well as the entire team of UNOSD to convene this webinar for such an important theme of employment and generating of decent work.
I'm sorry, Lawrence, to cut you, but could you allow me to share content, please? This is Benjamin.
Okay.
No, I'm the secretary. Yeah, sure. Thanks a lot.
Okay. Sorry. So, as I think John has presented myself, I'm representing the Global Social Economy Forum, which is a global network of local government and social solidarity economy networks. We are currently 75 members from 37 countries with 22 local governments and 35 social solidarity economy networks. GSF is promoting the social solidarity economy as a strategy for the sustainable local economic development of cities and regions and the achievement of SDG, especially to fight against the poverty and to generate decent work and to reduce the gender inequalities and more. And accompanying local government across the world in the collaboration process with the social solidarity economy actors, what we are trying to achieve is that through the co-creation of public policies and establishment of sustainable ecosystem, that we could really promote an inclusive and more sustainable development practices. Social solidarity economy includes associations, cooperative foundations, mutual organizations, and social enterprise. I think cooperative alone employs more than 10% of the employed population in the world, according to the World Cooperative Monitor. And in the European Union itself, it represents 2.8 million social economy entities, employing 6.3% of EU employment. So their impact actually goes far beyond those numbers, even though we do not have exact global data about the social solidarity economy. The demand for the social economy has never been so great in this time of COVID-19 pandemic. Social economy organizations have been a trust partner operating at the forefront of the crisis to address urgent sanitary and social needs, and also that they have been affected, like many other economic actors, very much by these pandemics. And they have expressed the difficulty to access government support measures due to inadequate legal forms where the governments do not recognize social solidarity economy organizations. But also categories of the social solidarity economy which employs generally very vulnerable populations who are very badly hit by these pandemics, and especially also the youth, women, and workers of informal sectors. According to the ILO, actually that more than 1.6 billion informal workers are very badly affected by the current pandemic, and especially in Africa as well as in Latin Central American countries, which represent nearly 80% of working populations. And it's also interesting that Social Economy Europe has conducted survey with 274 social solidarity economy organizations. More than 88% of those social solidarity economy enterprises express that pandemic and lockdown strongly affected their activity, and 71% have maintained really is difficult maintaining their employment because of the pandemic and its negative strong impact. Next. And despite of this very negative and grave social and economic consequences of pandemic, many local governments who are members of GSF have developed very innovative and tailored measures to the social solidarity economy. I would like to quote several of those practices, and especially the City of Montreal has implemented financial and accompanying measures to the social solidarity economy sectors, such as the reduction of the mandatory contribution to the social economy development funds from 20% to 10%, and providing physiological counseling programs and crisis management and human resource counselings. And also social solidarity economy is invited to the advisory committee for economic development plan put in place by the mayor. Livelihoods region of France took several steps to alleviate short-term cash flow problems met by social solidarity economy entities through various loans and support funds, and also supported the sector in a multi-stakeholder approach through the organization of weekly SSC crisis unit. And in the long term, they have launched a 140 million euro recovery plan towards an ecological and economic transition. Next. And City of Liverpool, which is one of the least developed and with very high unemployment rate in the UK, have also initiated 3 campaigns to support social solidarity economy sectors. Kindred, a campaign which connects, supports, and harnesses local entrepreneurships with the social goods. And also Liverpool City Region cares with the grants and crowdfunding campaign to raise £1 billion to support community and voluntary organizations. And recently, Building Back Better campaign targeting 1.4 billion pounds economic recovery plan unveiled in July, which includes the scale-up of Kindred and community and voluntary sector resilience program, and with the objective of generating 122,000 jobs. Next. And those measures are not only developed by cities and local government in developed countries, and many also developing countries are joining to the similar innovative practice. And City of Dakar also has supported social solidarity economy, even though majority are in formal sectors, through an initiative of rescheduling of repayment period through municipal development and solidarity funds, and incubating funds for the promotion of employment and so on, and also facilitating access of social solidarity economy organizations to public procurement opportunities. And Seoul Metropolitan Government has particularly targeted the support of social solidarity economy organizations in close relationship with self-employed organizations and small businesses, and they have actually supported more than 410,000 small and medium enterprises and self-employees. Next, please. So as we can see that through those various practices and measures proposed by the local and city government, actually the social solidarity economy are able to meet better the societal and also the economic need of their communities. And they are best potential in terms of creating and conservation of decent jobs. For instance, in Korea, all sector of social solidarity economy has launched a campaign not to lay off any employment in the sector through a fund of solidarity funds. And especially, I think, in securing decent jobs and employment in the sector of social solidarity economy will be very important for building resilience for the future, and especially in the post-COVID-19 crisis, because I think many social solidarity economy can help channeling job creation in emerging sectors like the care economy to look after the silver populations. And I think they are one of the most affected and vulnerable population of this crisis. Next, please. So I would say that at the moment that there are a lot of debate in terms of what kind of transformation we need in terms of economic systems or even social environmental systems. I think the social solidarity economy play a pioneer role in actually solving social and environmental issues in a very innovative way, but with multi-stakeholders, by identifying alternative economic development paradigms, especially rooted in territories. Innovative initiative and models where the social solidarity economy mobilized to respond to the crisis are meeting many demands of local government, and this partnership between social solidarity economy sectors and the local governments do bear quite important impact, both in terms of creation of decent jobs for vulnerable populations, but also mitigating economic, social, and environmental consequences. Next, please. So I would like to say that the most important probably challenges that we face for the Build Back Better strategy of COVID-19 crisis is to increase the visibility of social solidarity economy, because as I said, except few countries where legal systems are in place, the majority of those social solidarity economies still suffer from the invisibility, so they are not invited by the government to be the partner of co-creating of future strategies and plans. So it will be very important to increase the visibility and recognition of social solidarity economy. And to do so, there is a growing number of international initiatives and cooperation going on between several stakeholders, such as the United Nations Interagency Task Force for Social Solidarity Economy. But also, we are currently working with the UNLIST to publish a guidelines to help the local government on how to promote SSC through public policies. We are also calling for the national government to include social solidarity economy in recovery plans and reform programs, and define its clear role while allocating sufficient financial resources. It will be also very important to adopt a localized approach through which recovery plans can be channeled through social solidarity economy stakeholders, if possible through joint management committees and police councils. And OECD also has recommended quite in the same direction of public policies to the both national and local governments, and saying that social solidarity economy is crucial to play a very important and strategic role for current and future plan. Next, please. I would like to say just by this last words, I think in this time of crisis it's very important also to express international solidarity. And we are currently engaged with several social solidarity economy entities in Korea and the KOICA, Korean Organization of International Cooperation Agencies, to support social solidarity economy organization in developing countries in order to maintain their employment and their productive capacity of small and very invisible social solidarity economy organizations. So I think that by this, I would like to say thank you very much for your attention, and I would like to respond to some of your questions later. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sorry, it's a very, I know it's frustrating, it's very short, 7 minutes to try to keep it. It was very interesting. I learned a lot in this presentation, and I see that Montreal is doing fine. I'm very glad because I'm from Montreal, so I'm glad to hear about this. We'll have just a couple of minutes now for questions. So I don't know if there's any question to you or to Carlos. I don't see any question in my box here. Then I would like to know maybe maybe talking about the current barriers, you or Lawrence and Carlos, about the current barriers for local governments to achieve SDG 8, and where the impacts also of the COVID-19 are the most challenging currently. And also, I'm also thinking of one of the questions that came to my mind is also the informal sector when Sorry, when Carlos was talking. So measures about the informal sectors, I don't know if such measures exist as well. So Carlos, you may want to start.
I think Najat had her hand up.
Yes.
So
May I, John? It is a question to Carlos, please. How we make sure that the legal instrument or provision of the International Labour Organization are arriving to the local government? What I am seeing in my life, that is only the concern of embassies and the ministries of labor, but not the local government. I have never seen that the local governments are involved in the implementation of this international legal instrument. How we can change this situation? Thank you.
Actually, a very tough challenge. Can you hear me? Okay, it is quite a challenge. I need to make this short, and that is even a bigger challenge. The first thing is, as you know, the ILO is the only UN agency that is not only constituted of governments. 25% of the votes in any decision that is taken by vote in the ILO is by the workers organizations, and 25% of the votes are held by the employer organizations. So any of these conventions need to be already agreed to by workers' organizations and employers' organizations. That already gives you an entry point at the national level. Now, when you go at the local government level, then it becomes an issue of tripartite involvement. It needs to be that the governments, the national governments, the workers' organizations, and the employers' organizations get together in consultations, and there are several conventions that require such consultations, including the ones that I mentioned in my presentation, in order to put some lobbying or some pressure for local governments to be involved. The issue is that local governments, in the way that we're talking about here, are employers, no? But the employers' organizations do not include local governments. So local governments come here as governments, and then the government delegations and the governments themselves need to have in place structures in which local governments are going to be able to engage. For that, again, it is really important that the tripartite consultation process, governments, employers, and workers, is effective at the national level, so they can bring it all the consultations at all levels, national, sectoral, and also at the institutional level, because the local governments are both a sector and institution. So, hoping to be clear in the little time that I allowed, but in any case, you can still contact me. I believe my email address is going to be in the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carlos, and hopefully we will be together also at the International Mayors Forum later on in November. I think we should go now directly to Najat Zarouk, presentation, Director of the African Local Government Academy, ALGA. I think we should go directly to you now.
Thank you so much, Jean. Good morning, good evening, everyone. On behalf of our Secretary General, Mr. Jean-Pierre Lambassi, I would like to express our gratitude for inviting us to be a part of this timely event, to share with you what we are doing at local government in Africa, We are representing, it's like an umbrella in Africa, representing 47 National Association of Local Authorities. And I'm the director of this academy since 2016, after 31 experience in the Ministry of the Interior of Morocco and 8 years as experts on public administration in UN. So this morning, in this very short presentation, I will respect the time. So can I share my screen, please, so that I can manage the time? Okay. So you are seeing my screen? It's okay? So the title is Implementing and Localizing the SDGs, the SDG 8 at local level in Africa, the realities, challenge and commitment. I will focus on 4 main topics. The first one, why does SDG 8 matter for local governments? African local government authorities and employees on the front line to prevent and fight the COVID-19 pandemic, African local government challenges and needs, and I will finish with our commitment. Why this SDG 8 is important for local authorities. Local authorities, as it was said by Carlos, are first of all the major employers themselves. They contribute to put in place and enabler environment for economic growth. They are a key player and facilitator for local economic development. They work to attract investment, businesses on their territories through territorial marketing, partnerships, and decentralized cooperation. It is on territories that small and medium-sized enterprises are created and progress or facing failures. The public procurement they launch annually represent an important part of the national GDP and of the local budget. They are a key player for job creation and for income generating activities targeting women, girls, and youth, and the most vulnerable categories like disabled. They can support informal sector and promote its formalization. They can promote a sustainable tourism based on their potential, their local heritage, culture, and product. And finally, they can identify children at risk of child labor and work to ensure they attend school. So you see that local governments are a key actor to implement and localize the SDG 8. And we have seen during this pandemic, since the beginning of the pandemic, the African local government authorities are on the front line to prevent and fight the COVID-19 pandemic. You have here some examples, and I invite you to visit our portal to see all the best practice, all the initiative coming from the local authorities, even they are facing challenges and issues of resources and knowledge, and they are not used to such situation. So it's a multi-dimensional role, responsibilities and commitment at local level during the pandemic, starting from the support and the creation of an facilitating, supportive and enabler environment to implement and respect the decision for the health emergency. They are mobilized and they participate, they assist the health sector with all its components. They work to inform, to sensitize, to mobilize and engage population, communities and citizens. They are try to be prepared and to organize themselves, to adapt themselves to the lockdown of infrastructure, equipment and public services, and also to maintain some essential and critical public services, which not it's quite new for this local government in Africa. These are also some experience of the commitment and the mobilization of local agents and employees during the COVID-19. And people used to say, no, they are lazy, they don't do nothing. But everyone who is doubting about this commitment, ask yourself, the first act we are doing daily is the access to the water, the waste management, the electricity, the health, the ambulances, the transports, etc. So all these achievements, we have to keep in mind also the main challenges and needs facing the local authorities, and I will not insist on the political and institutional challenges. For example, the effectiveness of the transfer of competencies based on subsidiarity, and the adequacy between transferred competencies and resources. We used to say that we transfer problems to local authorities and we keep the resources and means at the central level. The organizational and management challenges, for example, all these weaknesses facing the local public administration, we have to ask ourselves if the local authorities have sufficient autonomy to deal with the human resource management, the problem of skills and capacities, the salaries and bonus, and the working condition at the local level. And this challenge between lockdown and reopening, I invite you to read our first report we have published in 2018 on the state of human resource of local governments in Africa. And the third block is the local economic development and the impact on economic growth. And here we have serious challenges faced by local governments in Africa, as it is everywhere. The role and responsibilities are not clear between central and subnational levels. The existence of multiple actors and stakeholders and the absence of integration, coordination, and coherence, the lack of knowledge and skills on economic aspects of the decentralization process, the issue of infrastructure, equipment, services, access to lands, the lack of sharpened profiles at local level, the lack of information, of statistics and data, and of course the impact of periodic crises like the COVID-19 on productivity, on resources, on local taxes, and on lead. What about workplace realities at the local level within the pandemic and beyond? This is some issues that the local authorities are not aware, and we need to raise awareness about these issues like the safety, the security, the well-being, the comfort, the health, the mental health, the social and the emotional aspects, the existence of diverse risks, and finally, do we have social dialogue at local level based on goodwilling and good fit? UCLG Africa commitments, and I will finish with this first point. We are doing a lot of lobbying, advocacy, mobilization at all levels of governance in our continent, at regional level and globally. We try to strengthen local institutions and to promote local autonomy. We work on empowering human capital, and this is the work and mission of ALGA Academy. I invite you to visit our website. We will have sufficient information about what we are doing to support our members, and we work for knowledge sharing and sharing best practices. Our flagship initiative and events, of course, each 3 years we organize our main flagship event is AfriCities. Next year it will be in Kenya, in the city of the county of Kisumu. We have a network on local economic development of Africa for so many years. We have the academy, we have the network of female elected officials, REFELA. We launched last year the African Capital of Culture. We have the Climate Task Force, and we have our annual forum, Leaving No One Behind, FAMI, organized by ALGA. Finally, we commit to build on the 3 main recommendations of UN Secretary General, leaving no one, no place behind, by ensuring that all phases and recovery plans packages of the pandemic response tackle inequalities and long-term development deficits and safeguard social cohesion. We work already on empowering and strengthening the capacities of local government through decisive and collective action and deeper cooperation between local and national authorities. And so far we have 30 Anchoring Institute in Africa and more than 20 partners around the world believing in what we are doing and supporting us, whether by funding our activities or sharing knowledge and methodology, best practices, tools, etc. And finally, engaging and acting for a green, resilient and inclusive economic recovery, both in urban, but I would like to emphasize also in rural territories. We have to keep in mind that these two parts of the territory is not only urban, but also rural. I would like to thank you, and I'm open to any question from the panelists or from the audience. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Najat. And then you finished with, I would have many comments and questions. I will not go into that, but this note about the rural and urban is very important. You just mentioned. We thank you very much. We will go now. Then we go with Mr. Il-Chang Yi. So the floor is yours, Il-Chang.
Thank you. Can I share my slide? Okay. Here it is. Can you see my screen as well? No, it's not. I think it's a wrong file.
Yeah, we see.
Can you see this? The webinar, UNOSD webinar thing? Can you see this? UNOSD webinar accelerating decent work file.
It says we see your screen, but it's the black screen.
Is it? Okay. Can you see now?
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you. We talk about the kind of pandemic as unprecedented case. I think it says something about the scale of pandemic itself, but it also says something about our complete failure in planning about emergency situations. So it says that we've completely failed in incorporating some response measures in our planning. So I think that is something we have to keep in mind whenever we talk about this scale of pandemic and our responses. So today, I'm going to talk about how to make responsive measures for decent work more effective, and how can you incorporate those measures into planning for building back better at the subnational level. Well, obviously, decent work concept has different dimensions, and it has economic dimensions like productivity, but it also has social dimensions like dignity, equality, fairness in income distribution, and it has political dimension like voices for women, men, and youth. So obviously, if you want to have decent work, we have to have very much comprehensive and integrated approach to deal with different dimensions of decent work. And I think this decent work has been threatened by this pandemic, depending on different degrees of pandemic outbreaks. So here is some kind of different situations you can find in different localities. You know, every municipal government has responsive measures depending on the degree of pandemics, and maybe we can think about these 5 different situations, from no reported cases to outbreaks and widespread sustained transmission where healthcare systems are overburdened. So depending on your situations of locality, you have to have different plans or responsive measures to deal with different situations about pandemics. And normally, local situations are affected by or influenced by national measures and local measures. During the pandemics, we could find different national measures. Maybe we can divide them into two different kinds. First one is existing local protection programs. So they are unemployment benefits and severance payments and support job research and career guidance. And many national governments established kind of responsive measures like job retention schemes, temporary tax reductions, training while on reduced working hours, COVID-19 basic incomes. But those newly established responsive measures and existing social protection programs have a cracks through which all those vulnerable people slip. So, for instance, unemployment benefits, they tend to exclude domestic workers, workers with low earnings, temporary or seasonal workers, and workers in informal sectors. And support for job search and career guidance have some kind of deficiencies in the program emphasizing sanctions on job refusal. So if you refuse your jobs, you cannot get benefits related to unemployment programs and all that. So there were some deficiencies in program. And newly established responsive measures have expanded the kind of beneficiaries to informal workers to some degree, but it still excludes those with short period of employment, workers hired by employers who prefer layoffs to furlough workers in gig economy, and excluded workers in informal sectors and workers with non-standard employment contracts. And temporary tax reduction obviously had positive impact, but they had kind of limits of time length, so some companies could not survive with this temporary tax reduction benefits. And training while on reduced working hours did not have a kind of infrastructure to have untapped kind of technologies to prepare for this kind of online education and trainings. And COVID-19 basic income was sometimes on targeting schemes, so it has kind of a exclusion error of targeting, so it excluded many potential beneficiaries. So what kind of role what kind of role the local government and local civil society and private sectors should have? First of all, I think those local actors, including the local government, should establish some schemes to support those falling through the cracks of national schemes. So those schemes can include work, health, and education-related schemes. And those local actors should facilitate and promote local circuits of production, exchange, and consumption. Especially, they have to pay attention to micro, small, medium-sized enterprises and social and solidarity economy organizations and enterprises. Lawrence talked about the advantage of having SSCOEs, social and solidarity economy organizations and enterprises and local levels. I think local actors should pay attention to those organizations. And local actors should invest in local social connections and community. I think I found very interesting evidence about how this investment can be translated into job retention and local economic activities. This is the kind of a survey result of consumer behavior, especially switching brands during the pandemic by McKinsey and Company. And if you look at this red circled area, those numbers of respondents indicate that they switched brands or makers of goods and products because those brands and manufacturers have some kind of social connections and employee retention schemes. So people, consumers, are paying attention to those social dimensions of economic activities during the pandemic. So, if local actors pay attention to these social connections and social capital, it can be translated into economic activities. So how can it be back better at subnational level? First of all, we need to have geographically disaggregated data. Local governments cannot have accurate policies and accurate planning to prepare for this kind of unprecedented crisis without geographically disaggregated data. So we need to have this geographically disaggregated data. Secondly, we have to ensure local government budgets to benefit the vulnerable. We have to pay attention to those people who are slipping through the cracks of national schemes, who are the vulnerable in our local areas. Thirdly, we have to empower communities to participate in decision-making process and evaluate local services. I think this is related to co-construction of integrated sustainable development plan with longer-term and emergency response perspectives at the local level. Without the participation of local players in decision-making process, we cannot have well-designed planning for this kind of emergency situations in the future. And lastly, we have to enhance service delivery and coordination by partnering with private sector and civil society in local areas. So I think I better stop here, but I'm going to answer your questions in the Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Il-Chang. That was a very good presentation. I will just make room for other. I'll make room for the questions from the participants that are online. So I would like to say this is a question for all the speakers. And also, would you be able to highlight remarkable, in your view, initiatives where skills of persons who lost jobs in the pandemic were used for other areas, meaning other sectors, other regions, etc.? So maybe we can start with Carlos.
Absolutely. I posted a couple of examples in the chat, in the question and answer. So I'll just cite them here. We do have an initiative in South Africa where we hired 20,000 young people to help with distribution of sanitizers and soap, and then to provide education on hygiene prevention measures. So also we have concentrated. We have also had in Zambia and India, at least, programs in which the HIV affected populations have been engaged in these efforts. So as you see, we're talking about two groups that we have identified as vulnerable. There are most likely others, because the issue is that our programs, particularly those that are providing infrastructure services, have had to refocus to address the issues posed by the pandemic. And many of these programs target these vulnerable populations. So the employment creation initiatives are also then geared towards addressing the issues behind the pandemic. So you can see there's quite a bit of literature that we have posted online regarding the ILO's efforts regarding the response to the pandemic. I will post it online. I mean, in the question and answer.
Thank you very much, Carlos. Somebody else wants to speak?
Okay.
Lawrence? Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. I would like to mention just two very innovative initiatives. First is one initiative initiated by the local government of South Korea to introduce local currencies in the measures and financial packages that they have proposed to mitigate negative impact of COVID-19 crisis, especially for self-employed people or many small merchants who have closed down because of the lockdown measures. And when there was no income and they were almost forced to a situation to lay off the people, the local governments have proposed a financial package which are paid in local currencies, which can be only used in local areas. So actually boosting of local economic actors and initiative. And this has really greatly contributed to the resilience and sustainability of small and very vulnerable self-employed peoples. Second initiative is that many people who lost their employment due to the COVID-19 have moved to a booming sector such as the delivery service of food, because people are not going to the restaurant, but people are ordering from their home. So it's kind of platform economy are flourishing without any social protections. So many local governments are actually engaged in organizing and helping them with relevant support of social protections and social rights. And actually that there are a lot of clusters are organized also that by social economy organizations who are proposing a kind of cooperative form of collective management and collective administration for these self-employed people who are inexperienced and who are exposed to the great dangers of this long working and exposed jobs. So actually that I'm just saying that local governments who know very well about the difficulties and constraints of those local economic actors in their territory, they are the ones who are coming first with a very innovative and tailored response to address those social, economic, and financial issues. And I think many times those initiatives are coordinated in multi-stakeholder partnerships with various actors who need to be mobilized. For instance, in the case of platform economy, we need to mobilize National Assembly to make laws relevant. We need to mobilize the trade unions to come up with possible also support for the social right protections and so on. So I think the local governments are a very important role player in terms of providing this ecosystem for innovative initiatives.
Thank you, Lawrence. I don't know if any other want to say something on this. Yeah. Sorry, I see Najat. I see you, and please go ahead.
Thank you, John. It is not a question, but a recommendation for this webinar. You know that the local authorities are still facing the COVID-19 in Africa, and the cases are increasing daily. We need to document this initiative coming from local authorities and to have some narrative. I have seen so many initiatives from Metropolis, from Lawrence, from UCLG Africa, and other organizations. But we need to have somebody who can gather all this information, this data, the statistics. Why? To prepare ourselves for any future crisis like the pandemic. I have in mind Africa have known the Ebola, but nobody has document this crisis, so it can be used as an example to better face such crisis and to be ready to deal with. Thank you.
Yes, John.
I think I have one question related to my presentation, and question in the chat box is from Yesun Kim, and she asked question like, why is having geographically disaggregated data important for local governments in preparing for crises like COVID-19? I'd like to answer this question. We normally say that we cannot manage without measuring. I think this is kind of relationship between policies and data. And if you think about one province and different departments within the province, and one department has a concentrated population of the vulnerable group to pandemics, like elderly people and all that. And if you know the kind of disaggregated data about those vulnerable populations in a certain area within your local jurisdiction or national level, you can easily allocate different human resources and resources to address all those problems about the pandemic situations. Without that kind of disaggregated data, it's quite difficult to have efficient and effective policies and programs and allocation of resources. The problem we have, especially in developing countries, is that we do not have well-designed and well-surveyed disaggregated data geographically. So many governments at the local level do not have clear idea or information about the spots of vulnerability in their own regions. And I think, so if you want to have some good policies, we have to have some infrastructure. And one of the major infrastructure elements is geographically disaggregated data. I hope I answered that question.
Thank you very much to all of you. Maybe just okay, let me see which part of the economic sector of kind of workers was most vulnerable to this breakout of COVID-19, and how can the local government address them, like in terms of unemployment issues, and most effectively. So this person wants to get some examples as well. So, just
what was the question again? Sorry, John.
It says, which part of the economic sector or kind of workers was most vulnerable to this breakout of COVID-19, and how can the local governments address them or the issue in terms of unemployment, or address those issues more effectively?
Okay.
We saw that information that came about. A lot of opportunities. At the same time, I would say, and no social protection is also an important point. So maybe it could be combined. I saw Lawrence. I saw El Chang and Najat. So maybe Lawrence.
Okay, I will be very quick. I think I mentioned very briefly during the presentation that the sector which is most affected by the COVID-19 probably are the workers who are working in informal sectors and migrant workers. But I think by the definition, because they are informal and they are invisible. So as I said, I think most of countries and both national and local governments, they have not included relevant measures and public policies to address their immediate needs. But nevertheless, I think as like organizations like ILO, OECD, and many of international organizations currently are working on these issues. But also, many of social economic organizations are working directly and with those groups, because by the definition, social economy works with most of vulnerable populations. The sectors which are most affected are the social economic organization enterprise working in social services, education and training, because most of schools are closed down, as well as cleaning, security sectors, tourism sector, which are completely almost collapsed and which generate a lot of employment, as well as culture, art, and so on. So, as I said, there is some kind of inter collaborations and solidarity among social economic organizations, but also many local governments are in dialogue with them and try to propose more tailored, adapted measures and support systems, such as the financial packages and so on. But these are only when local governments are sensitized and aware about the important role that social economy are playing in terms of maintaining and also generating more decent work for those vulnerable groups. And so I think those countries where there is no recognition and sensitization among the local governments as well as national governments, I think most of those organizations are left behind and are not actually coming up with relevant measures to protect them.
Okay, thank you very much, Lawrence.
I can add something here, because we have been really concerned about the plight of migrant workers, because migrant workers have been affected mainly because they just don't have the option of social distancing. And they don't have necessarily the personal protective equipment necessary to prevent the spread of the disease. In fact, in several countries where the workplaces where migrant workers are have become really the super spreaders, to say it that way. And then on top of that, because they have become the center of the spread of the disease, then they become stigmatized. And they usually don't have access to healthcare. Now they have less access. So we have been calling attention to their plight quite intensely. And we have, particularly in the case of refugees, we have been actually addressing those issues, because in many of our programs, we have refugees. For example, in Jordan, we have programs with refugees from the Syrian civil war, which we have enabled them to work regularly like other workers. You know that refugees, one of their problems is that they're not allowed to work. So under ILO programs they are. So we have been trying to get them the appropriate equipment and the appropriate treatment that they need and access to healthcare. So that this is one vulnerable group that we really have been paying a lot of attention to. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carlos. Then we'll go briefly, Najat and then Ilchan, but try to be brief. We're stealing the time of everyone because now we're beyond our time. Please, Najat.
To respond to this question, I think we need to keep in mind the two main issues. The first one is the national context and the specific context of each local government. If we are in a locality that is the economy is based on tourism, the situation is very, very tough and very challenging, because we have seen that all the restaurants, the cafe were closed, the cultural infrastructure, the tourism, the airlines, the airports. So what the local government can do, of course, if they are involved in this national and institutional arrangement, they can work to communicate and to have a strong strategy of communication to explain the situation, to try to find solution. They work to allow this economic sector to access to information and all the opportunities put in place or initiative put in place by the national government. They can do advocacy to try to find solution, to lobby, because it is a situation that not only one actor can find solution. It required a collective action, a co-responsibility at all level of governance. Thank you very much. Thank you.
I think the question about informality is quite interesting because in the 1970s, informal economy, the term informal economy was coined because at that time we could clearly differentiate formal economy from informal economy. So formal economy, you have workers with formal contract and standardized contracts, and informal economy, you have workers with informal contracts and non-standard contracts. The problem we have these days is that you can find workers with informal contracts and non-standard contracts in formal economy too. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a wrong question to ask like which sector is affected by a pandemic like this. The right question would be what kind of people, what kind of group of people are going to be affected by this pandemic. Mm-hmm. So I would say migrant workers, workers with informal contract, non-standard contract. You can find those people in different sectors. Where it can be big multinational companies as well, and it can be service industry, it can be manufacturing industry. It doesn't matter, as long as you have people with informal, non-standardized contracts, they are the vulnerable people to this kind of pandemic. So I think this pandemic is also an attack on neoliberal, flexible labor market regime, which generated workers with non-standardized contracts and informal contracts. I better stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I mean, this is very interesting. I mean, that was at first I was with this idea, informal economy or formal economy. You're right. Like it's absolutely true that it's more like a contract or security or all those things. I mean, because you can have a formal contract, but then you may be laid off. I mean, just the week after. So there's no protection. So I think we all agree on this. I'd like to continue, but this is now we're going very too much too late. And then for that, I will not make a big speech, but I would like to thank you very much to you, the speakers, and also for the very interesting questions that came from the people also. And then I'd love to do more. I think we need to. I mean, this is of course, this is a team who will again address at the International Mayors Forum in November. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank Mr. Carlos Carrion-Crespo, Specialist Public Service at ILO. Sorry, I do it short. Ms. Lawrence Quark, Secretary General of the GSEF in Seoul. Najat Zaruk, the ALGA, Director of the ALGA in USCLG Africa in Rabat, and Mr. Il Chong Yi, Senior Research Coordinator at the UNRISD in Geneva. We will have those. We'll put together the report, the slides, everything. The presentations will be online, and I would like to also to invite everyone to our next Thursday. We have another webinar in the same series at the same time. So wherever you are, this is the same time. So 4 p.m. Seoul, but everywhere it's same time that today. And it's on local governments, the climate crisis, and a green recovery from COVID-19. We heard people today talking about the green recovery. So next week, this is what we will talk about. And I convey you to the invitation for next week. And again, many thanks to our distinguished speakers. It was very fantastic. I mean, we learned a lot. And I think we need to have more of these. So let's continue the conversation also.